In 1863, Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address, beginning, "Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal." This same proposition was used by John Quincy Adams to free the slaves aboard the Amistad in 1839, and then invoked again by Lincoln during the Civil War. However, the proposition that all men are created equal is no more than that, a proposition. No law describes these rights, yet the writer of this phrase believed they were inalienable, the rights prescribed to people by God and by nature. And 2.5 centuries later, this proposition remains key to how Americans understand their country's values. Unfortunately, America falls short of this standard throughout history, and still into the present. At the birth of this proposition, and thus the birth of America, the man holding the quill was also a man holding slaves. Thomas Jefferson, revered and reviled by Americans for the duality he embodied. The love of equality and freedom as an idea, but the seemingly impossible task of embracing it as a reality. Jefferson was the champion of freedom, the freedom of religion, of education, and most importantly, in his opinion, property. Property was the key to self-sufficiency in Jefferson's opinion. He believed in an agrarian state where everyone held their own plot of land because he believed this was the only way to achieve full freedom. Dependence on an economy or in a government meant people could never truly be free. This is why he hated the idea of a manufacturing state. Workers would only be tools in an economic machine with only one skill, dependent on the rest of society, in which only a single class at the very top would be truly independent. This class of elites would represent the oligarchy and the tyranny of a monarch, not unlike King George III. In Jefferson's mind, this elite class would take all the freedom of life, liberty, and property away from the workers at the bottom, leaving them in relative slavery. Jefferson seems to have missed the irony in his ideas. The hundreds of enslaved laborers he kept at his home in Monticello might not have seemed to him as a truly human class of people enslaved by a mini-monarch, but today we have to notice the tragic irony. Jefferson didn't believe that African Americans could feel like white Americans could, and didn't believe they had the intellectual or emotional capacity of European Americans. Although he was hesitant to break up families of slaves, he ultimately did not restrain himself, as he believed that non-white Americans could not feel the same emotions of love and grief that white Americans could. Jefferson's fears of a manufacturing society began to take shape soon after the Civil War. The Second Industrial Revolution began around 1870 and ushered in the Gilded Age, and under that guild of glistening wealth and high society lay the thousands upon thousands of workers unable to claim that wealth for themselves. The mass production of the Second Industrial Revolution posed many more problems than the First Industrial Revolution had. Workers, artisans, farmers began to see their labor counted for less and less as they struggled to keep up with the mass production of machines. Workers needed an income, but less and less of the money was going towards the bottom of society, and more was going to the top. In short, income inequality was reaching record highs in America. Deadly labor riots broke out. African Americans were held in a system of virtual slavery, sharecropping, and many other workers were held in wage slavery. And as the economy stagnated for the lower half of society, immigration from Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia began to increase. And this was the part of the manufacturing state that Jefferson didn't predict. With resources and jobs so low already, anti-immigrant sentiment was virulent. As the Gilded Age ended and the Progressive Era began, ideas like eugenics became more mainstream, and the Ku Klux Klan re-emerged from the ashes of the Civil War. This may sound like a familiar refrain. Scholars often compare the Gilded Age to our era. When the economy stagnated in the early 1990s and the early 2000s, it was accompanied by an influx of immigration from Latin America and a growing wealth inequality in which more and more people on the lower end of society got less and less of the money. The dystopian manufacturing state Jefferson envisioned mirrors our age. The wealthy and powerful, a kind of oligarchy, scapegoat immigrants and people of color for the problems which are caused by industrialization and concentration of prosperity. In 2017, less than 5 miles away from Monticello, Heather Heyer, advocating for the proposition that all people are equal, was murdered by a white nationalist. From the moment our country was founded, we have struggled with being able to live up to the standard that everyone deserves life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our society goes through periods of progression and periods of stagnation. It is the essence of creative destruction. But our democracy is deteriorating under bigotry. We are a multicultural country, and we are becoming more diverse by the day. Instead of fighting amongst ourselves, we should be brainstorming ways to meet the challenges of the future. And to do that, we need an economy that promotes the ideas of the Declaration of Independence, promotes the idea that we are all equal. An economy where the proletariat aren't forced to fight over resources while the middle class suffocates and shrivels, the wealthy profit, and immigrants are blamed for the scarcity of prosperity. America's core values are sound, but we face the challenge of an almost unprecedented idea, a democracy that is both truly diverse and truly democratic. 250 years ago, our founding fathers began a nation dedicated to the proposition that we are equal, that we have inalienable rights. Our country has changed radically since that time. It isn't the America the writer of our proposition imagined, but it doesn't have to be, because the spirit of his ideas still guides us to this day. We should not give up on his proposition, because as flawed as our country is, it is still our country, a country that belongs to all of its people.